All right, hello everyone, and welcome to lab number 6 for ASI 320. So what we're going to be talking about today is animal performance. So I've included this lab in this course because oftentimes when we present data, when we're talking about animal nutrition trials or whatever else it may be, we're talking about the performance of that animal. And so when I talk about animal performance, I'm talking about livestock only. So in this case, it's going to be body weight used to calculate gain or yield, such as milk or eggs. So typically body weight we use for our animals that are growing that we're going to be using for meat production versus yield that applies more obviously to our dairy cattle or our laying hens. And so when we're talking about animal performance, there are two main goals that we have as animal scientists, is that we want the greatest efficiency for the lowest cost of production. So what this means is that we want the greatest performance of that animal for the least amount of feed because that results in lower costs to feed that animal. Our other goal, kind of stemming off of that, is we want the greatest profit for the lowest cost of production. So we want more milk, we want more body weight gain, and we just want that animal to grow a lot faster or a lot more efficiently to give us a better profit. And so in today's lab, we're not only going to be focusing on performance of animals in terms of body weight gain, calculating that, we're also going to be taking some economics into consideration. The only real exception to this rule are going to be animal health feed additives. So here I'm talking about supplementing with maybe some sort of antimicrobial or whatever it may be to help improve the health of that animal. And so what our goal is with those feed additives is that ideally, if we feed them and they prevent whatever problem from happening, in addition to improving the performance of the animal, that's great. However, if we do not see a change in animal performance, that's fine as well. What we do not want to happen when we provide these animals with some sort of feed additive is that we see decreased performance. So we're going to start off with the simplest of measurements, which are average daily gain and average daily feed intake. And so all average daily gain is the weight an animal gains per day, expressed as pounds per day, grams per day, kgs per day, what have you, some amount of weight per day. And so we're going to do an example. A pig weighs 50 pounds upon arrival to the farm. And 10 days later, the same pig weighs 62 pounds. What is the pig's average daily gain for this period? So I've given you 3 pieces of information here. I've given you the starting weight. I've given you the end weight. And then I've given you the time frame. And so eventually we want our answer to be in pounds per day. Okay? So how we start off with this is that we know the pig ends at 62 pounds. And from that, we subtract the starting weight, so 50 pounds. And we're going to divide that by the time frame, which is 10 days. So that gives us that pig gained 12 pounds over those 10 days. And so when we take 12 and we divide it by 10, we get that on average, that pig gained 1.2 pounds per day. And that's going to be our final answer. Okay. Our next example is average daily feed intake. So average daily gain is important since that's directly looking at the performance of the animal. But what's also important is how much feed that animal is eating per day, since feed does cost money. So average daily feed intake, the way to calculate this is fairly similar. So the weight of the feed an animal eats per day expressed as pounds or kilograms per day. So the example is the pig from the previous question ate 30 pounds of feed in those 10 days. What is that pig's average daily feed intake? So the pig ate 30 pounds of feed in 10 days. So on average, 30 pounds divided by 10 days, we get that the average daily feed intake for this pig is 3 pounds of feed per day. Okay, so that's all pretty good, but this doesn't really give us any indication of how good that animal is at utilizing this feed to turn it into muscle or fat for growth. So that takes us to our next measurement, which is feed efficiency. And feed efficiency can be expressed either as feed to gain or gain to feed. They give you the same message, it just depends on the animal that we're working with, which one is preferred. Feed to gain, so we abbreviated F to G, is the amount of feed consumed to gain 1 pound or 1 kilogram of muscle. And we want this number to be low, right? So we want it to be low because less feed consumed to gain 1 pound means that animal is using less feed and therefore it's costing us less money. The inverse of that relationship is gain to feed, which is the amount of weight gained per 1 pound or 1 kilogram of feed consumed. So we want this number to be high. It's just the inverse of the previous. So if an animal eats a pound and gains 3 pounds of muscle versus an animal that eats that same 1 pound and only gains 1 pound of muscle, the animal that gains the 3 pounds is going to be more efficient since they gained more weight off the same amount of feed. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and look at this mathematically. So when we're talking about feed efficiency, this is a really good measure that we use in trials in order to compare feedstuffs or to compare different animals on how efficient they are. So example number 1, my cattle consume 200 pounds of feed per head and on average gain 32 pounds per head. Okay, what are feed to gain and gain to feed? So my cattle consume 200 pounds of feed. So this is the feed portion of that ratio. And on average gain 32 pounds per head. And these are both on a day basis. So this is our gain. What are feed to gain and gain to feed? So we'll start off with feed to gain. And so we have our feed as 200 pounds. And we divide that by our gain, which is 32 pounds. And we get 6.25. And then we can also measure gain to feed. So it's just the inverse of that ratio, right? We're going to take the gain, so 32 pounds, they gain when they consume 200 pounds of feed, and we get 0.16. Okay? So these numbers are unitless because the pounds, as we see, cancel. So these numbers are useful to us because for most animals, if you've been in the industry long enough, you know what's pretty typical for a feed to gain or a gain to feed for a steer or a pig, etc. But where we're going to see it's very useful is when we're comparing these animals to a group of other animals. So My neighbor's cattle consume 180 pounds of feed per head, so that's the feed, and on average gain 25 pounds per head over the same time period. Are his cattle more efficient than mine? So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to calculate feed to gain. So 180 divided by 25. And we get 7.20. And then gain to feed is just the inverse of that. We're going to do 25 over 180. And we're going to get 0.14. Okay, so now we can compare efficiencies, and typically when we're doing these, we would just pick one or the other ratio to do, but in this case, we did both just for the sake of practice. So now we're going to compare whose cattle are more efficient, my cattle in example 1 or my neighbor's cattle from example 2. So my feed to gain for my cattle is 6.25. So that means it takes 6.25 pounds of feed for 1 pound of gain. Versus my neighbor's cattle, his cattle require 7.20 pounds of feed per pound of gain. So my cattle end up being much more efficient because they require less feed to gain a pound. Versus my neighbor's cattle, they require more feed to gain a pound. Okay. And then if you look at gain to feed, it tells a similar story. So we want gain to feed to be higher because that indicates a greater efficiency. Okay, so my neighbor's cattle have a lower gain to feed compared to my cattle. So my neighbor's cattle only gain 0.14 pounds per every pound of feed they consume. But my cattle are much more efficient because they gain 0.16 pounds of weight for every pound of feed they consume. Okay, so are his cattle more efficient than mine? So that no, less efficient. Okay. Our next factor is we're going to start bringing economics into this problem. So the cost per pound of gain. So this is the amount of money you're investing for your animal to gain 1 pound. And we want this number to be low, right? We want to spend less money for our animal to gain a pound or a kilogram of weight because this means that we're putting less money in and we're getting a greater profit later on. And so the majority of our costs are going to be from the feed. So in our example here, it costs $49.29 to feed a pig during the finishing period, which is from 60 to 270 pounds. What is the cost per pound of gain? Okay, so in this example, the pig is coming to our farm and it weighs 60 pounds. So that's our start weight. And when we send him to the packer, he weighs 270 pounds. So we only had him for that weight gain of 60 to 270 pounds and what that cost of feed relates to. So we want our answer to be in dollars per pound. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take the cost to feed that pig, so $49.29, and we're going to divide that by the weight gain of the pig, right? So not the 270, because that's the end weight of the pig. We're going to divide it by the amount of weight that it gained. So the pig ended at 270 minus 60. And so that translates to that 49.29 over 210 pounds. And so I get that it costs 23 cents per pound of gain. Okay. And then our last example is going to be called something we refer to as income over feed cost. So this is probably the most important measure out of all of these because this is looking at your direct profit. So we use this a lot to understand the benefit of adding a feed ingredient. So in a lot of the trials that we do, we may see that one feed ingredient may result in greater growth of that pig, but that feed ingredient is more expensive to feed. So at the very end of the day, our profit may be less because we spent a lot more money in order to feed that pig. So this is also going to be different based on the style of production. So there are a lot of other factors that go into this scenario, but the biggest factor again is going to be the cost of feed as well as the market price per pound for that pig. So we're going to get into our example. It costs $49.49 to feed a pig from 60 to 270 pounds. Market price for a pig is 60 cents per pound. So what that means is that when that pig gets put on the truck and sent to the packer at 270 pounds, we're going to figure out what profit we're going to get. Okay, and in this case, we do again have to be mindful that we're having a pig come in at 60 pounds and end at 270. So we can't consider the growth of that pig under 60 pounds because we weren't investing in that pig yet, right? So in this example, our first step is going to be number one, to calculate the gain of the pig from the time it was with us. So we have 270 pounds end weight minus 60. So 210 pounds gained. So when we talk about market price, we're going to apply the market price to the weight of the pig that that pig gained. So we're going to figure out our earnings. So 210 times So when I take 210 and I multiply it by 0.6 or 60 cents per pound, I get that I earned $126. Now, some people get confused why I'm using the 210 rather than the 270. We would use that 270 number if that pig was at our farm the whole time and our feed cost was reflected of feeding that pig from 0 to 270 pounds. However, the feed cost that we have was only when that pig was on our farm, starting at 60 pounds and ending at 270. So Using this information, we're now going to calculate our income over feed cost. And so we earned $126 from putting weight on that pig from 60 to 270 pounds. From that, we're going to subtract how much it cost to feed that pig, which was $49.49. And we get that our income over feed cost is $76.71. Okay? So for you guys, I've included some practice problems that are very reflective of the 4 different calculations I went through here. So that relates to problem number 1. And so then for problem number 2, what I did was I actually gave you more of a real life data scenario. I think this is very applicable if you're going to continue on in animal science, go to grad school, go to vet school, stay in the industry. It's really important to be able to look at numbers and figure out whether or not your animals are being more efficient, whether you're getting a better profit. So in this problem, you're a graduate student at Kansas State University testing the effect of a new corn variety on growth performance of finishing pigs. You weigh the pigs at the start of the trial and then every 30 days until the pigs are shipped to market at 90 days. Throughout the trial, you also keep track of how much feed the pigs consume. The data below is an average for each treatment. And so, looking at this data, just so that we're all on the same page here, we have average pig weight pound. So for this trial, we started the trial on day 0. All the pigs on these 2 treatments were 90 pounds to make it equal. And then every 30 days, what we did was we weighed the pigs, and each of these numbers represents the average weight of a pig at each of these time periods. And so if we were to try and figure out the overall weight gain of a pig, for instance, for the control corn, I would take 276 minus 90 and I get 186 pounds is what that pig gained over this time period. And if I'm interested in what the average daily gain is, all I do is I take that 186 and divide it by 90 days, right? Since the whole trial went up to 90 days. And then in table 2, we have feed intake pounds per pig. So in this scenario, I'm telling you how much feed the pig consumed over each of these time periods. So from day 0 to 30, one pig consumed 136 pounds of the control corn. From 30 to 60, 295 pounds. And from day 60 to 90, 201. And so how I would figure out how much feed that pig consumed on average for the control corn is I would take all of these numbers and add them up, right? So I have 136 plus 295 plus 201. So I get that that pig consumed 632 pounds over that whole treatment period of 90 days. Okay, so some students will sometimes get confused as to why I subtracted the weight and added the intake. So I subtracted the weight because when we're talking about weight, we're interested in gain, right? So we're subtracting the starting weight from the ending weight. Versus when we're talking about feed intake, I'm interested in how much feed that pig consumed per day. So let's say the pig consumes 2 pounds one day, 2 pounds another day, and then 2 pounds on the third day. So altogether, over those 3 days, that pig consumed 6 pounds. And let's say I want to figure out the feed intake over the whole treatment period, the average daily feed intake. All I would do is I would take the 632, divide it by the 90 days, and I would get 7.02 pounds per day. Okay, so that's a good jumping off point for you guys. The goal of this is to compare which of the treatments is better, the control corn or the test corn. So I've already kind of helped you complete parts of A and B, and then it's up to you to complete parts C, D, and E. And then based on all of the numbers that you've calculated, you're going to come to a conclusion of which corn you would recommend feeding your pig and why.